Avoidants don't have a smooth love language. They have a scrambled one. It's hesitant. It's contradictory. It's full of pauses, backtracks, and moments where their emotions crash into their survival instinct. And survival wins. You reach out and they pause too long before responding. Not because they're playing games, but because they're battling two truths in their head. I want this person, and this is dangerous. And instead of confidently choosing connection, they freeze in the fear of getting it wrong, of being too much, of not being enough, of being hurt. Again. So they text you, but only after staring at their phone for an hour. They make plans, but reschedule last minute and hate themselves for it. They tell you they're busy, overwhelmed, not ready, and then watch every story you post and scroll through old pictures like you're still the center of their private world. And they are, but they don't know how to be close to you without feeling like they're losing control of themselves. So instead of leaning in, they flinch. They hesitate. They do the emotional equivalent of walking through fire barefoot, one shaky step at a time. You think they don't care because they're not expressive. But here's the thing. Expression is a luxury of the emotionally safe. When love was once used against you, when vulnerability once cost you everything, you don't express. You survive, you move with caution. You do love in quiet, dysfunctional, fragile movements. And if you don't know what that looks like, you'll miss it completely. You'll miss the meaning behind that dry, awkward text that says, hope you had a good day, but took all their courage to send. You'll miss the way they ask about something small you mentioned weeks ago and act like it was just casual, but it's not. It's evidence they never stopped thinking about you. You'll miss the way they show up at 30% when you want it 100%, not realizing that 30% for them was a war, that to them showing up at all was massive. Avoidants love in fragments. They love in spurts. They love in moments of boldness followed by weeks of hiding. They love in cautious proximity. They come close, then freak out and vanish. They say something vulnerable, then immediately regret it and act cold the next day. And if you don't understand this pattern, you'll take the distance personally. You'll think they changed their mind. You'll think it meant nothing, when in reality it meant so much it scared them senseless. You ever seen someone flinch when a hand reaches out to help? That's the avoidant in love. They want the hand, they crave it, but their body remembers when the last hand promised safety and then dropped them. So they pull back, or pretend they don't care, or make a joke. They'll say you're crazy when you get deep, or call you dramatic when you express a need, because if they took your emotions seriously, they'd have to take their own seriously too. And that's a door they've kept sealed for years. You say, if they loved me, they'd tell me. But for the avoidant, saying it is the most dangerous part. Saying I love you is the moment of no return. It means they've declared something they now have to live up to. It means they've let go of control. It means they've made themselves vulnerable to loss, abandonment, and heartbreak again. And they'd rather die than feel that again. So instead of saying, I love you, they say things like, text me when you get home. You still like that stupid coffee place? I can't believe I missed your birthday. I'm trash. You're annoying, but you're my annoying. I had a dream about you. Don't let it go to your head. You laugh, you brush it off. But you don't see what that really is. That's their version of, I care about you, I miss you, I'm scared to lose you. That's them bleeding affection through sarcasm and indirect comments, because saying it plainly, that would require them to drop the shield, and they're not ready, not yet. But you'll see the struggle in the way they hover, in the way they check in just when you've given up, in the way they say they can't be in a relationship and then act like your boyfriend or girlfriend every single day, in the way they claim they're not emotionally available and then get jealous when you talk to someone else. You'll see the glitch in their actions, the contradiction, the inner war. That's how you know. That's the emotional investment hiding behind the mask. They won't always chase you. They're not built to pursue, but they'll stay close enough not to lose you. And if you pull away, they might not say, don't go, but they'll act weird, off, distantly panicked. They might lash out or withdraw. Not because they're punishing you, but because your distance activated the deepest fear they have, being left without explanation. You want declarations, but what you get is confusion. And you think that means you're not loved, but what it really means is they love you with a broken compass. They're trying to find north in a storm. And if you pay attention to their struggle, you'll see it. You'll see how hard they're trying to be calm when their whole nervous system is screaming to run. You'll see how much energy it takes for them to ask you to stay. You'll see how loud their silence really is. When they struggle to respond, but still do. When they say, I don't know what this is, but never stop coming around. when they act distant, but check in at 2 a.m. just to make sure you're okay. That's not disinterest. That's love fighting its way through fear, through trauma, through defense mechanisms that have kept them safe their whole life. And now here you are making them question if safety is the same thing as being alone. So no, they won't tell you outright, not until they feel like it's safe to feel. But if you're watching, really watching, you'll see the truth in the struggle. You'll see the investment in the inconsistency. You'll see the care in the chaos. Because for the avoidant, loving you isn't easy. It's terrifying, it's exposing, it's real. And real is the scariest thing they've ever known. They don't say it, but you feel it every time they show up. It's not just out of habit. It's a decision they wrestled with, a decision that came with a storm inside their chest, because showing up for them, it's light or easy. It's a declaration of war against everything they were taught to believe about love. Every time they reach out, every time they come back, every time they ask, are you okay? Or say, just checking in. It's not casual. It's a quiet rebellion against the very instinct that tells them, run before you get attached. They show up even when it terrifies them. That's how you know. That's the sign you've been missing. Because avoidants don't keep coming back unless there's something pulling them harder than their fear. They've mastered the art of disappearing. They've spent years detaching before detachment is required. They don't chase. They don't plead. They don't cling, but when they're emotionally invested, they return again and again. Maybe not with flowers or love poems, but with presence. Scared, messy, half-built presence that says, I don't know how to do this, but I know I don't want to lose you. And they're not good at it. Let's be honest. Their version of showing up might look confusing. They'll call you, then stay silent on the line. They'll sit near you but not know what to say. They'll send a meme instead of a message or ask about your cat instead of your heart. But that's not avoidance. That's effort disguised as awkwardness. That's love trying to break through the only way it knows how. Cautiously, clumsily, but consistently, because to show up means vulnerability. To show up means risking rejection. To show up means being seen. And avoidants have spent a lifetime perfecting the art of not being. They learned early on that presence invites pain, that being open invites judgment, that emotional intimacy is just a countdown to betrayal. So when they ignore all of that and choose to stand in front of you anyway, understand this. They are choosing you over their own comfort. That is monumental. They might show up in ways that look insignificant. A comment on your post, a random message, a sudden offer to help you move, fix something, or pick you up from the airport. Don't miss this. These are not small acts. These are massive shifts in someone who's hardwired to disappear. They don't do these things lightly. They do them because something about you breaks the pattern. Something about you makes staying worth the fear. Sometimes they won't even understand why they're doing it. They'll show up and feel confused, feel agitated, feel out of control, because their body is screaming, back away, but their heart is whispering, not this time. And the internal tug of war they feel is exhausting, but they'll still come, even if they're late, even if they cancel first and reschedule later, even if it's awkward, they still come back. Don't let their emotional struggle make you believe their presence is meaningless, because for an avoidant, presence is everything. Presence means vulnerability. Presence means exposure. Presence means I am willing to sit in discomfort if it means I get to keep you in my world a little longer. That is not nothing. That is not avoidance. That is the opposite of avoidance. That is commitment in disguise. You'll notice they show up most when they think they've lost you, because the threat of losing someone who actually makes them feel something, that's what snaps them out of hiding. That's what overrides the shutdown response. That's when they realize that the silence they once used as a weapon now feels like a prison. They'll show up when you're tired of waiting. They'll show up when you've stopped chasing, because in that stillness, they finally hear the echo of their own feelings they tried to mute but couldn't. They'll knock, not because they know what they want to say, but because they couldn't bear the thought of not knocking at all. They'll come back, not with answers, but with questions they're finally willing to ask. They'll stand there silent and scared because in you, they found something they didn't expect. Someone who didn't run at the first sign of their fear. Someone who stayed long enough to be seen behind the armor. And that kind of presence, That kind of witnessing, it changes people. They're still scared, still guarded, still trying to figure out how to love without self-destructing. But every time they show up, they're telling you something deeper than words. You matter more than my fear. That is not weakness. That is not confusion. That is courage on a battlefield they've never won before. And you'll know when they show up, even if they don't say a word. You'll feel the weight of their effort and the tension in their shoulders. You'll see it in the way they hover near you, like proximity is their apology. You'll hear it in the awkward laughter, in the nervous energy, in the unfinished sentences. That's them trying. That's them saying, I don't know how to love you, but I'm trying not to lose you. Sometimes they won't even make eye contact. Sometimes they'll pretend it's casual. But they came. They came when they didn't have to. They came when their old self would have ghosted, vanished, shut the door. They came because something about you feels like safety, even if they don't have the language for that yet. And you'll feel the temptation to dismiss it, to say it's not enough, to demand more. But understand, you're watching a human being override their own nervous system for you. That doesn't look like a Hollywood love scene. It looks like panic wrapped in presence. It looks like someone who is terrified of closeness still choosing to sit beside you even if their hands are shaking. This is where the healing starts. Not when they have all the answers, not when they say all the right things, but when they start to stay, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when they have no idea how this ends. That is how you know they're emotionally invested. Not because they speak it fluently, but because they fight themselves every day just to keep you in their life. They show up not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. You are worth it, even if they haven't figured out how to say that yet. Their body is saying it. Their consistency is saying it. Their resistance, their return, their restless heart that keeps circling back to you. All of it is screaming, I don't want to run anymore. And that may be the loudest declaration of love they've ever made. They won't say it, but they test you. Oh, they test you hard. And if you don't know what's happening, you'll take it personally. You'll think they're trying to hurt you. You'll think they're pushing you away because they don't care. But the truth is far more raw, far more fragile, far more revealing. Because when an avoidance starts to emotionally invest, they don't lean in with trust. They lean in with fear. And they test your love because they don't believe it's real. They want to see if you'll stay, but they're terrified that you will. And they're terrified that you won't, so they do something subtle or not so subtle. They cancel plans last minute. They go cold for a few days. They throw out a sarcastic comment that hits too deep. They say something like, maybe I'm not built for relationships right after an amazing weekend with you. And you're left wondering what just happened. You feel like everything was going well, then the rug is pulled out from under you. That's not an accident. That's the test. They want to know, can you handle the mess I really am? Will you still want me when I'm not charming, when I'm not available, when I'm not trying to be lovable? Will you leave when I make it hard to stay? Will you run if I stop performing? These are not conscious thoughts. They don't sit down and plot this. But their nervous system is wired for betrayal. Their body expects abandonment. And so they create the moment before it happens to them just to see if you'll do what they're scared you will. And here's where it gets wild. They want you to pass the test, but they're betting you won't. Because deep down, they don't believe they're lovable. They don't believe anyone really stays. They're waiting for you to prove them right while silently praying you'll prove them wrong. That inner conflict is why the test is never gentle. It's sharp. It's jarring. It's emotionally confusing. And if you're not aware of what's going on, you'll think the whole connection was a lie, when in reality, the test is the proof they care. People who aren't invested don't test you. People who don't care don't sabotage closeness. People who have nothing to lose don't create storms to see who'll swim. But avoidants do, because love to them is an open wound. It's not safety, it's risk. It's not comfort, it's chaos. And when they start to feel themselves slipping into it, their whole system throws up red flags and alarm bells. And their first instinct is, before I give myself away, I need to know if this person is real. So they poke you emotionally. They stir the waters. They say something that pushes your boundaries just to see if you will explode, disappear, turn cold. They expect rejection because it's all they've known. And some of them have been through hell. Narcissistic parents, abusive relationships, people who only stayed when they were performing, So now they test everyone, including the ones who actually care. You might think if they trusted me, they wouldn't do this, but it's the opposite. They test the people they feel most deeply for because they need to know if the ground is solid before they stand on it. And they don't trust their own judgment. They've gotten it wrong before. They've trusted people who destroyed them. So even when their heart whispers, this is good, this is safe, their trauma screams, you're walking into a trap. And that scream is louder. So they test. They test by withdrawing and seeing if you chase. They test by getting reactive and seeing if you stay calm. They test by picking a fight and watching if you fight back or shut down or walk away. And they're not doing this to manipulate. They're doing this because their inner child is terrified of being seen and then rejected. And that fear makes them do things that hurt you, yes, but not because they don't care. Because they're afraid they care too much. And here's what hurts them more than they'll ever admit. When you pass the test, when you don't snap, when you see past the push, when you respond to their chaos with clarity, it hurts because it disarms them, because it proves there was no threat, because it shows them that they could have just trusted you, and they hate that. They hate that they caused damage when you were only there to love them. And that shame is the next thing they battle. Because for the avoidant, letting someone love them is painful in ways you can't see. You might ask, why not just say what they feel? Why not just be honest instead of testing? Because honesty means exposure. It means I like you and I'm scared. It means I want to get closer, but I don't know how. It means I'm afraid if I let you love me, you'll leave me like everyone else did. That kind of honesty takes a level of emotional safety they've never known. So instead, they throw out behavior like flares in the dark. And they wait to see how you react. And if you react with peace, with empathy, with boundaries but not abandonment, they notice, they remember. They don't always say it, but that becomes part of their internal blueprint. And that's how you earn their trust, not by always being perfect, but by being consistent in the face of their inconsistency, not by tolerating abuse, but by understanding when the test is a trauma response, not a red flag. This is not about excusing toxic behavior. This is about recognizing the language of someone who was taught that love is conditional, fragile, and dangerous. They will only test the ones they're scared to lose. They will only push away the people who make them feel something real, and they don't always know they're doing it until after it's done. So when the avoidance starts to test you, pause. Look past the behavior. Ask yourself, is this a pattern of disrespect, or is this fear dressed as fire? Because the way they test is often the same way they love. Awkwardly, indirectly, and with walls they don't know how to lower. But if you catch it, if you understand it, if you don't flinch when they throw the test at you, something powerful happens. They begin to believe that love doesn't always have to be earned through survival. And that is the moment their healing begins. They told you the avoidant doesn't love. They told you they pull away, they ghost, they run, and you believed it. But what if I told you the avoidant doesn't run because they don't care? They run because they care too much. See, we've been reading the wrong signals. Interpreting silence as disinterest, distance as detachment, and withdrawal as rejection. It's protection, their own. The avoidant has learned something you haven't. They told you the avoidant pulls away because they don't care. They told you the silence means it's over. They told you if they wanted to, they would. And you believed it. Because that's what makes sense to the rational mind. That's what feels clean, simple, black and white. But love, real love, especially when filtered through fear, doesn't show up in clean lines. It shows up in chaos, hesitation, contradiction. And here's what no one told you. Avoidants don't run because they don't feel. They run because they feel too much. You've been standing there, watching someone drift, watching the text slow down, watching the eye contact break too quickly, watching the messages go unanswered for days. And you told yourself, they're just not that into me. You told yourself, if I was enough, they'd stay. You blamed yourself. You tried harder, you softened, you waited, or maybe you left. But what if I told you behind all that silence was someone who felt so deeply for you, they didn't know how to handle it? See, the avoidant has spent a lifetime learning to control connection, not to build it, to survive it. Somewhere they learned that closeness is a trap, intimacy is a threat, and love is a weapon. Or somewhere along the way, they were loved in a way that burned them, or abandoned in a moment that taught them never again. They didn't build walls to keep you out. They built walls because once upon a time, they let someone in and they never recovered. And then you walked in and suddenly the armor didn't fit right anymore. Suddenly something in you felt like warmth. like softness, like home. It's exactly what terrified them. Because when you feel like home, the avoidant feels like the frightened child again, standing at the edge of something beautiful but dangerous. And instead of walking in, they retreat. Not because they don't care, but because caring feels like drowning. What you read as disinterest is actually emotional panic. You text them, they stare at their phone. They type a reply, delete it. Type again, let it sit, close the app, come back, post a story, watch yours, scroll through your old photos, and still say nothing. You assume they don't want you, but the truth is they want you so much, it hurts. And they don't know how to want something without losing themselves in the process. So they run. Not to get away from you, but to try to regain control over the emotions that make them feel weak, vulnerable, out of control. And to the avoidant, vulnerability isn't intimacy, it's danger, it's exposure. It's the old fear that if they really open up, you'll see all the broken pieces they've been hiding and you'll leave. Or worse, stay and use those pieces against them. So they protect themselves first. That's why when the connection gets real, they don't lean in. They vanish. But here's the paradox that will wreck everything you thought you understood about them. The deeper the connection, the harder they pull away. The stronger the feelings, the more they resist. Because the avoidant doesn't have an off switch for love. It's all or nothing. And nothing feels safer. You think their distance means you're not enough. But in their mind, your closeness means they'll lose themselves again. And if you knew what it costs them to come back after they pull away, if you knew how many times they retype that message, how many times they hover over the call button, how many dreams they've had where they held you and hated waking up alone, you'd stop calling it rejection. This is the part nobody talks about. The avoidance silence is not empty. It's full of internal war. It's full of love they can't express, affection they can't show, and connection they can't control. And when they finally do come back, even awkwardly, even quietly, it's not because they figured it all out. It's because they missed you more than they could stand themselves for it. So stop measuring their love by how loud it is. Avoidants don't shout love, they whisper it. In the form of checking in randomly, in the form of remembering something you said months ago, in the form of watching your stories every day but never replying, in the form of showing up when they said they couldn't, in the form of staying just a little longer when everything in them says run. You want fireworks, but for an avoidant, love is not fireworks. It's walking through a minefield barefoot. Every step closer to you feels like a risk. Every layer they shed feels like exposure. And every moment they care a little more, they lose a little more of the only thing they've ever trusted, control. And if they're still showing up, still texting, still calling, still orbiting your world in any form, that's not apathy. That's investment through fear. You think love is proven by presence, but with an avoidant, love is proven by return, by effort through resistance, by the trembling hand that reaches out even after being burned. You thought they didn't care, but the truth is they cared too much to let themselves fall freely. Because falling for you feels like falling back into every trauma, every memory, every scar they swore they'd never feel again. But here's the rawest truth. If they didn't care, you'd never hear from them again. You'd be a ghost, a stranger. But if they're trying, even a little, then love is there, hiding, trembling, fighting for air. And it may not look like the movies. It may not sound like the songs, but it's real. And it's costing them everything. Don't miss that, because you're looking for the loud sometimes. The quiet ones are the ones bleeding love under their breath. You think love is a gift. You think intimacy is warmth. You think connection feels like home, but not for them, not for the avoidant. For them, love isn't the safe place you believe it is. It's a battlefield. You come in with open arms, they flinch like you've drawn a weapon. You offer closeness and they feel the noose tightening. You give your heart and they hear sirens in their head. And the world will tell you they're cold, detached, indifferent. But the truth is more devastating than that. Love to them feels like a threat, not a blessing. Not because of you, but because of everything that happened before you ever arrive. You see affection and think safety. They see affection and remember betrayal. You think cuddles and connection. They think manipulation in disguise. You speak the language of love like a native. They speak it like someone who learned it in a war zone. Every sentence laced with caution, every pause filled with fear, every I miss you choked in the throat before it ever reaches their lips. And when you try to get closer, you think, why are they pushing me away? Why is love so hard for them? But that question has 1,000 answers buried in pain. Maybe it was the parent who showed up just enough to make them hope, then left just long enough to make them stop. Maybe it was the first person they ever loved who used that love as leverage. Or maybe it was years of believing that needing someone is the first step to being destroyed. Whatever it was, it taught them this one truth. Never let anyone close enough to hurt you. So here you are, standing on the edge of their heart, offering something real. And instead of walking forward, they freeze or run or lash out. Not because they don't want what you're offering, but because what you're offering feels like the same fire that once burned them to the ground. Love doesn't feel like healing. It feels like risk. And the closer you get, the louder the alarms go off in their mind. They start asking questions they don't say out loud. What if you leave? What if you lie? What if they give everything and get nothing back? What if the minute they let their guard down, you decide they're too much or not enough? What if this is just another trap? And these questions don't come from paranoia. They come from history, from scars, from nights they cried alone because they dared to trust someone who didn't stay. So they build distance like armor, not to reject you, but to survive the possibility of being consumed. They crave intimacy, but only in doses they can control. They'll let you close, but just enough that they can still slam the door if it gets too real. They'll tell you half the story, leave out the parts that make them feel naked. And if you ask too many questions, push too hard, get too consistent, they panic because consistency feels like commitment. Commitment feels like exposure. Exposure feels like death. This is the torment they live in. Wanting you, needing you, craving what you give, but terrified of what it might cost them if they fully receive it. They want to love and be loved, but on their terms, on their timeline. And when they realize they can't have you and keep their walls up, they choose the walls. And when they realize they can't have you and keep their walls up, they choose the walls. Not because they don't value you, but because the walls have never betrayed them. They'll sabotage. They'll say they're not ready. They'll start fights. They'll disappear right after a deeply vulnerable moment. They'll say things they don't mean and stay quiet when their whole soul is screaming to reach out. And you'll sit there confused, hurt, angry. You'll take it personal. You'll wonder what you did wrong. But the truth is, you didn't break them. You just touched a place in them that's never known safety. You need to understand this. When love feels like a threat, survival becomes the priority. And survival for the avoidant means staying in control. It means detaching before they get attached. It means hurting you a little so they don't have to feel the devastation of you hurting them first. It means choosing loneliness over the vulnerability of being seen and maybe rejected. It means choosing numbness over love because love is chaos in their nervous system. You might think they're emotionally unavailable, but they're not. They're emotionally overwhelmed. You might think they're heartless, but they're not. Their heart is locked in a vault built by years of pain. And every time you show up, you're rattling the door. And that's terrifying because if they open it and you leave, they won't survive that twice. So what does this mean for you? It means if they let you in even a little, it's not small. It's massive. If they tell you something vulnerable, even half jokingly, they are handing you a weapon they've never trusted anyone with. If they cry in front of you, even once, you are seeing a side of them they've buried so deep, even they don't know how to look at it. If they tell you they're scared, believe them. Not because they're weak, but because you matter enough to make them afraid of losing you. But here's the paradox. Because love feels like a threat, they may treat you like the enemy. They may react to your love with resistance. They may test you, push you, ghost you, confuse you. Because they don't know the difference between fear of abandonment and fear of intimacy. It's all the same ache in a different costume. And you'll ask, how can someone who wants love be so afraid of it? But that's exactly the point. They want it so deeply, so desperately, that the idea of not getting it, of tasting it and then losing it, is unbearable. So they choose control. They choose space. They choose silence. Not because they're cold, but because they're trying to protect themselves from the very thing they crave. You are not the problem. Love is not the problem. But in their mind, love equals loss. Love equals exposure. Love equals dependency. And dependency feels like giving someone a gun and hoping they won't pull the trigger. That's why they pull away when it gets real. That's why they act hot and cold. That's why they love you in the shadows but panic in the light. If you've experienced this, don't shrink yourself to fit their fear. Just understand what you're up against. You're not just fighting for love. You're fighting through trauma. You're standing in front of someone whose nervous system is wired to see closeness as danger. And yet, if they're still here, still trying, still showing up in their broken, glitchy, terrified way, it's because something in you feels like peace, even if they don't know how to receive it yet. You're waiting for words, for clarity, for the grand reveal, for them to look you in the eye and say, I love you, I choose you, I'm in this. But that day doesn't come. And you start to spiral. You wonder if you're imagining the connection. You wonder if they're just using you. You wonder if maybe it was never real at all. But what you don't see, what no one tells you, is that when someone's wired for avoidance, love doesn't pour out of their mouth. It leaks out through their struggle. If you want to know how they feel, don't listen for what they say. Watch what they can barely bring themselves to do.